win for no apparent reason.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, that's life. Righto. Hey, guys, ladies and gentlemen, we're just doing a quick live stream because yesterday's Supreme Court case in New South Wales was on. It didn't quite go how most of us would have hoped, I suspect, or certainly most of the people in my circle were hoping for a little bit something. I was a bit disappointed. But a friend of mine and a regular contributor to our little platformy program here that we do at Resolute TV is Andrea Tokaji. Andrea is a human rights lawyer, so she's no dummy. She knows stuff about the law, and we all know that the other stuff I know about the law is any time I've been arrested, bullied, or harassed and had to sort of figure a bit of stuff out. No, that's not quite true. I don't get arrested very often, but you know, I sort of thought it'd be nice to reach out because a lot of people who saw the court case yesterday were watching. At one stage there was 70, 80,000 people, I think, watching this court case live on YouTube, which we all know doesn't happen. Andrea is about to go to a freedom march over in WA. She's a WA girl. She's a kick-ass machine. She's a 100% advocate for liberty. The Liberal Party kicked her out, which makes me love her even more because the Liberal Party. But look, I guess the key thing is, mate, what was your interpretation as a legal eagle of what in the hell went on and what the hell was that judge thinking? Because clearly he's, from what I could see, he was just covering his own ass. It didn't inspire me much at all.
Yeah, look, that's a great layman's term summary, actually, Dean. Listen, I was part of the court case from behind the scenes. I'm currently working as a legal academic, and so they got me on board as their legal researcher. So, you know, trying to formulate the legal arguments from the back end and, you know, discussing it with the team. So I knew from the outset that the Supreme Court perhaps isn't the best place for a constitutional argument, but it is still valid, right? And we made those legal arguments based on the facts of the case, right? We had 4 plaintiffs, 2 in the medical industry, 2 in construction. And the facts of the case often determine those legal arguments. And, you know, we went broad. We talked about human rights. We talked about due process and a public servant's duties in relation to that. We talked about, obviously, the Public Health Act and under the emergency powers. And we talked a lot about basically the rights of citizens, basic inalienable human rights. And unfortunately, yesterday, what we saw was a miscarriage of justice because His Honour said Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights. And in saying that, he was basically saying, you know what? Those human rights arguments you made, doesn't matter. He also said that the discrimination that comes from those who are mandated now to take the vaccine is actually consistent with the Public Health Act, Section 7.2 in New South Wales. Obviously, each state and territory has slightly different wording and different references because it's a state-based legislation. His Honour also said that it's not the job of the judiciary, the court's role, to look at policy and comment on it. Now, I'm sorry, Your Honour, but the role of a court is actually to determine whether the application of the law is fair or not. And when it is worked out in certain circumstances, so the facts of the case, you know, we've got these health workers and construction workers, how is the law practically applied to their lives? And how is it working? And is it proportionate? And is it measured? And is it fair and just? That is the heart of the role of a court system, to test it and to set that precedent and to push back on bad legislation. So it is absolutely appalling that His Honour he basically dismissed all legal arguments, right? And he, in my mind, he didn't consider them deeply. So what we're left with is opportunity to either appeal or to raise this matter in different jurisdictions, in different courts, including the High Court, And look, we can use some of the same arguments, but we can also use different ones based on, again, the plaintiffs that we have. I'm sure you know that Sareen Tefahar of Advocate Me and her team have a national class action. So their national class action has a slightly different approach because of the nature of it. It's national. They've got heaps of plaintiffs, you know, and therefore they're able to make certain she's formulated certain different arguments, right? And it's like, if you have a legal issue, you can actually poke the bear from, 500 million perspectives. And that's the nature of the law, right? So in one sense, this is not the end. In another sense, this is a very frustrating process because, as we know, the law takes so much longer than we wish it would to change, to amend. So once Parliament passes law, it's so much more difficult to actually amend it.
Oh, look, my natural instinct's to walk into Parliament, start just slapping people. I reckon that would be the simplest solution. All this, you guys talk and think too much. Just go in there and start slapping people. I mean, that silly little twerp of a judge really didn't inspire me. A lot of people have turned around, and I get a lot of questions from lay people because that's how I roll. And one of the questions I got yesterday was, well, was the court case, were the arguments thought out long enough? Maybe they should have taken more time? And I'm thinking, how much more time do you want? Like, I mean, we're under the gun. If we're going into a battle against communist dictators, which is what we've got, we don't have all 5 years to plan a defence. They've got the gun at our head now. Here's where the gun is. How are we going to react? And that's, I guess, where we're at. You guys yourself, and I know you do a bit of work with the couple of law firms that were involved. So it's not like you're on the outside looking in, so to speak. You're more of an insider certainly than I am. And you can't just pull an argument that takes 5 years worth of work out of your backside in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But these things have to happen in real short order. In hindsight, was there other things you would have liked to have added or taken away or would have done differently? I mean, there always is, but anything that you think could have been a game changer?
Yeah, look, the lead. Hi, mate. How you going?
That's okay. Do you want to say hello? And to the other people watching? That's okay. You are now anyway, including the government.
So really, I had made some suggestions, but those matters are not up to me because I'm not the lead lawyer in the case. And in fact, I currently don't have a practicing certificate. I came in as a human rights advocate, as a legal academic, so every person on the team plays their part, so to speak, right? So yes, I think that there's different strategies for different purposes and different times. And for example, here in Western Australia, we've got a very unique case. We've actually never had one case of COVID in our community. Not one. And yet we're still under emergency powers. Now, how, pray tell, is the Parliament justifying that 18 months later? As you know, Emergency Management Act says an emergency is meant to be issued for 14 days in a state until they sort it out.
But power-hungry totalitarians. And Mark McGowan did send himself a Father's Day card as being the father of Western Australia. So the guy's obviously off with the fairies. He thinks he's God, Lord and Saviour and, completely out of control. Obviously, I'm imagining you saw what's happened with David Limbrick and Tim Quilty down in Victoria regarding not showing – they're the Liberal Democrat MLCs down there that have basically been told if you're not willing to show your papers, you're not allowed to vote on Parliament. Which seems
that's right.
Timing regarding, the emergency powers that need to be reenacted as they would have been dissenting voices. Mate.
Yeah, look, it's happened here as well in Western Australia. We've had a local MP in the Legislative Council, Nick Moran, be called out by Mark McGowan. Show us your vaxxed, stamp of approval. And the Honourable Nick Moran made some really compelling arguments in Parliament. Number one, the Privacy Act clearly states that no one, not your employer, not your husband or wife, not your best friend, has any right to ask you about your medical history, your medical record. That is private, and that is between you and your doctor. So no one has a right to ask you these matters. And yet, under emergency powers, apparently anything and everything can be violated.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we've got a situation where the head of the snake is these emergency powers. That is what we need to target. We need to call out government on how they're justifying extending these powers, because that's the only reason they can make these orders. It's the only reason they can make these declarations, including mandates. If there was no emergency, they couldn't do this.
Yep. And let's be fair, if you give them the opportunity and they know that the only way to keep and maintain such power is having more and more of these emergency powers, what are they going to do? They're going to have more and more emergency powers. It's very easy to create an emergency. Anybody who's ever watched any or read a history book knows that. Mate, and anybody in the audience who does want to ask Andrea Tokaji, Andrea's a human rights lawyer. She's involved in the case yesterday in Sydney. A quick question. She's on a very short time limit. She's about to go out to the freedom protests in WA because she's a fucking hero and I love her. Put your questions in the inbox or whatever it is, and I'll ask as quick as we can and we'll get through it. We're only on a short turnaround this morning. We will get it back for a longer sit down, but we really wanted to sort of touch on this as soon as possible for everybody. Sophie McRae just asked, yes, emergency powers definitely the issue. Very easy to create emergency powers. That's sort of the game that we're playing. It's very ordinary.
Just on that.
Sorry?
Just on that quickly, did you know how Hitler rose to power?
Look, I've read a few history books on it, but I'd love your interpretation.
He rose to power using emergency powers, and he retained those emergency powers throughout the 5 years.
It's also interesting, Julius Caesar did something somewhat similar at one point back in Roman history.
Yeah,
not something that's never been done before.
That's right. In more recent history, it happened in Croatia and other countries where they went from a democracy or pseudo-democracy into a dictatorship.
Yeah.
Because once you say that the nation is under an emergency, you as the leader have all rights reserved to you without due process, without transparency, right? Without proper parliamentary procedure, and you become, therefore, a dictator. It's by virtue of process.
And Australia currently has a bunch of little dictators within their own fiefdoms, and it's I've got no time for any of them. I'm not yet sold on Dominic Perrottet. From what I understand from my insiders, he's the best of a bad bunch. It'll be show and prove if he wants any respect out of me, which I'm sure he can give two shits what I think. But from my ilk is you need to show and prove. You need to lift these lockdown orders. You need to get this bullshit off the table as quickly as possible. And we all know Slomo is one of the most spineless leaders in Australian history. I always use the analogy. Would I go over the wall at Gallipoli with that guy? And I'm not going anywhere with ScoMo. I wouldn't go around the corner of this park with ScoMo. I wouldn't have anything to do with it given the choice. What do you reckon? Who's the best option? How do we get out of it?
Look, we have a federal election coming up, although we need to be real. The AEC, the Electoral Commission of Australia, has been redistributing boundary lines. Why? Because those who are in power at the moment are trying to restrict your votes. They're trying to restrict your voice at the polling booth. So what they're doing is they're collating the regional votes into the city votes. We all know what's going to happen, right? Because often regional votes are more conservative, they're more measured in their voting, so that becomes a problem. They've also been talking about introducing this electronic voting system that was in process in America in their last election. So we all know if that occurs, how it's going to go down. So we're up against it, but we need to make our vote count. We need to get out there and fight politically. That means lobby your local members, lobby your premiers, your health minister, your emergency services minister, right? Who oversees the Emergency Management Act. And you need to talk to them about why you got an issue with this stuff. I've got templates you can use for lobbying. I've written out the law so you don't need to do it yourself, but put your personal story in there, right? Put it in there. On election day, get out there. Months before election day, get out there. Talk to people. Educate the common constituent. You know, for too long, Aussies have not cared about politics. I come from a communist dictatorship regime, and I know if you allow those who are evil to hold power, what's going to happen? And Aussies, God bless them, she'll be right, mate.
Poor naive fools.
She'll be right, mate.
Too good for too long. Too good for too long.
Beer on the beach, right? It's just as bad as bread and circus during the Roman times. Don't get distracted. Focus. Because if you don't fight for your rights, they'll take it away from you. If you don't fight for your freedoms, they'll take it away from you. And guess what? They already have. You think about every freedom. They're inalienable. They're God-given. Your human rights, you're born with them, right? No one should be able to take them away. But they have. You think about every right. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of life, freedom to work. They've taken it all away. Where are you?
With a slash of a pen. Slash of a pen is all it took. A little bit of fear and a little bit of bloody propaganda, and everybody shit the bed. I'm probably at the wrong end of the spectrum, because I essentially don't think my grandfather went to war to fight for this nonsense, or any of my grandfathers or great-grandfathers that went to war. I don't think they went to fight for this shit. I'm pretty confident. Sophie's mentioned that it's like a pseudo-democracy. Is that where we're at? Yeah, I would say so. It's democracy in name.
Democracy has fallen in Australia. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now, what about the Constitution? Do you see any actual value in it, or is it just another glorified piece of paper that is really a bit of a waste of time? I've got some American friends that even think theirs is only a glorified bit of paper. I mean, can it save us, or are we sort of at the point where we really need that Bill of Rights, and how the hell do we go about getting one?
Look, any piece of legislation, any law is only good as its enforcement. So how do we enforce it? If it's not the coppers that are protecting us, right? It's us fighting for our rights and freedoms and pushing back on the encroachment of those rights and freedoms. Look at the history books, okay? If it's not through lobbying and advocacy, if it's not through political means, if it's not through the judiciary, what other option do we have? And don't get me wrong, I think we need to take all those options right now. We need to fight on all fronts, okay? Take a multi-pronged approach and lobby and advocate and go to the polling booths and, you know, have a clear voice there. Palmer United Party has partnered with Reignite Democracy. I think that's a wonderful partnership. They're both on the right track. Look into them. We also have a circumstance where, you know, our judiciary, let's just say, it cannot be relied upon. So, what are we going to do about it?
Well, that's an excellent question, mate. Now, I've been lobbying for most of the small parties for quite some time. As we know, I work with the Liberal Democrats, and no, we're not affiliated with the Liberal Party. They fucking hate me and us with a passion. We're having a red-hot crack. One Nation on some topics are really, really good. Australia won with Ricardo Bosi. I'll stand next to that guy all day. In fact, in Eden Monero, he was number 2 on my how to vote card. I was number 2 on his. So, you know, we're on the same page. Clive Palmer, as much as I think Clive's a bit of a blowhard lunatic, I do like the work that they're doing, and I hope they hold the line and stick to their guns. Are there any other small parties that we sort of haven't really promoted? Because if you don't like mine, and there's a slight difference, I can tell you now that I'm working on some alliances as well for the upcoming federal elections. Because if all the small parties work together, the bottom line is, even if you've always voted Liberal or Labor or Greens or whatever your entire fucking life, now's the time to put them at the bottom of whatever ballot you're in. Those 3, 4, including the Nationals, because we all know it's the LNP for a reason. Nationals, Liberal Party, Labor Party, and Greens need to be at the bottom. If there's 10 in the thing, I don't care how low or what order of low you put them, but put them towards the arse end, because that's where these miserable tyrants belong. As far as I'm concerned, those 4 parties might as well unite and call themselves the Communist Party of Australia. It'd save a lot of rigmarole and less ballot space. But that's sort of how I see it, mate. What about you?
Absolutely. So the other thing is, at the moment, Parliament is sneakily pushing legislation through, right? Under emergency, there is no parliamentary due process, debate, and the like, as in, you know, normal parliamentary sitting, because, you know, there's an emergency. There's too much to do. And what's happening is they're passing through amendments for example, to the Biosecurity Act that allows them to then place the unvaccinated in these health facilities. There's a petition going around for that. You need to get amongst that. There's also legislation at the moment before federal parliament in relation to these vaccine passports. It's phase 3 of the government's rollout for health and safety. Now, we need to use our common sense. Statistically, medically, scientifically, we have a 0.02% chance of getting COVID. Does that sound like an emergency?
I'm shitting
If
bricks.
we get COVID, we have a 97% chance of recovery. We need to understand these statistics as they are. We need to do our own research, go to the experts, go to the guys who've made the PCR tests, who are saying it doesn't work. It picks up the cold and flu from 2 years ago. It's picking up COVID in the vaccine that you've taken, right? We need to go to the scientists who made Pfizer and are saying, this is the worst poison that a pharmaceutical company has ever made. We need to go back to the source, do some digging, do your own research. Understand the state of play here, people. Understand the severity of our situation, that our nation is in a crisis. And look internationally at Israel as a case study. They're up to their 4th vaccine and they're in lockdown. Why? Doesn't work. What about Sweden? They never had lockdowns. They never had mask wearing. They had herd immunity. Look at international case studies. Look at the statistics, dig deeply and go to the sources. Find out what those scientists are saying. Those medical experts. There are 12,000 doctors here in Australia who've been gagged, but they want to speak out and they want to say, do not take this. 12,000. We've got the majority of the health profession leaving their jobs this week and next week because they don't want anything to do with this. I'm up here in the Pilbara at the moment. We've got about 50% of all the mining, oil, gas, industry, FIFO industry, not wanting anything to do with it. Why are so many people reluctant? Do your research. What is this really about? Follow the money trail. Understand deeply what's going on. Wake up.
Well said, mate. Well said. You know, I love your take on things. Jim Bowden would like to know if you have a law practice in Sydney, Andrea.
No, as I said, I'm a human rights advocate and I'm a legal academic at the moment, but I'm in WA. I'm in Western Australia. So, trying to sort out everything here. And yep. I lecture in law and I teach people about the law. And I've been a human rights advocate for 12 years, you know, internationally, in different countries, in Australia. And part of the reason why is because I'm a refugee kid. You know, I lived under a communist dictatorship regime where I didn't have any individual rights or freedoms. So I'm very passionate about human rights and how we can advocate for them in our nation. And there's a lot we can do as a country, but we need to stand united.
Yeah, 100%. And it was Professor Augusto Zimmerman, anybody who wants to sort of go down this rabbit hole a bit further, who introduced me to Andrea and said, look, talk to Andrea. She's brilliant. You know, you'll like her. Augusto Zimmerman's fairly high profile and doing some great work. And sorry if this is echoing. I'm out in the middle of the wind here. So that's when Andrea said, I'm available now. And before I go to this march, I was like, well, too bad we do it and we run with the audio. So be it. But yeah, look, mate, I really appreciate your time. You're off the Freedom March now, so make sure you sort of, tag us and all that sort of stuff while you're out there. Anyone who wants to check out more of her, she is definitely a Resolute TV gal, so she's fully on board with our crew, and there's interviews with her previously that we've done, a bit more long form, and she'll be coming out with more and more stuff as we go along. So, Andreas, my platform is your platform and all that sort of stuff, you know. So thank you so much. We love what you do. We really respect you. And, yeah, keep fighting. And I'm going to keep stirring them up over here in New South Wales. And let's try and really dig in at these federal and council elections coming up and just give them the blowback that they deserve. Huh?
Good on you. Well done.
Righto, mate. Enjoy your freedom rally. Make sure you share heaps of photos and stuff on the page and speeches and whatever so everyone can follow on. All right, thanks, guys.
Take care,
Have a great afternoon. See ya.
See you later. Bye.